Hello everyone, my name is Tiffni, and I'm going to begin reading Out of the Ashes, the Fallen Ones. So in the beginning, God created the great creatures of the sea and every living thing with which the water teems and that moves about in it, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Genesis 1:21. Chapter 1, The Fallen Ones. Our story is often coiled with anger, fire, and blood. Whatever it is that you think that you may know of us, you don't know our whole truth. You don't know the history of the darkness that lurked in the night to keep us from our true path. You may have heard of the tales of some of our ancestors. You may have heard some of their stories. The stories of how they represented the darkness and brought forth destruction and chaos as they killed many lives. But you did not know them before the darkness had reached them. They have always been the ones flying through the clouds, hurting others, burning villages, and pillaging golden treasures. They are described as large, scaly demon lizards who fly in the air with a furious rage to kill anyone that crosses their path. With impenetrable armor for skin and wings so large they could block out the sun. Their teeth are like jagged mountains, and their claws are just as fierce. But that has not always been their purpose, to be killers, winged creatures of the night. We weren't supposed to be hateful, selfish, gold-hoarding serpents bellowing hot gases and fire on all our enemies. That was not who God created us to be. That was not who God created dragons to be. In Genesis, God created the first heaven. Then he made the earth. He was hovering in between the lofts of the heavens, and he spoke, "Let there be light." And there was light. In that first burst of light, we were born. We were created to serve God. We were created to protect heaven. We were created to protect God's beloved when they were laid to their final resting place and they were able to enter through the gates of heaven to be with God again. When the first 12 dragons appeared in the beginning of time, their sole purpose was to help God keep the darkness out of heaven and to protect God's faithful creation. It is said that we were magnificent, that there is none like us on earth. Our bodies are made of lean muscle, like etched stones, and our scales flowed in a gold-covered shield that covered our whole body. It was hard as titanium and reflected God's light with such radiance that it was hard to look at us if we flew in the sunlight. We could breathe out pure natural gas, and with a click of our jaw, it would ignite into a pure blue flame that would turn anything into a pile of ash upon contact. Our wings could shield us from any enemy or any weapon that could cover the full length of our body from head to tail. We are magnificent creatures. We are light bearers. We are dragons. In Scripture, God speaks of heaven, which is built with streets of gold and stones made of rubies and emeralds. He tells us that He's building us a mansion with many rooms in heaven, that we will no longer want for anything. There will be a feast on a table just waiting for us. We will no longer have hurt, anger, pain, jealousy, rage, fear, torture, anxiety, sickness, or disease. There will be a throne room for God and His Son, with 4 living creatures worshiping the Lord, day and night. There will be a multitude of angels and people standing before the Lord, worshiping Him, crying, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord." The heavens are our reward for being faithful to Him here on earth. All the sacrifices we had made, the riches that we gave away to help others, we would get it all back to us when we got to heaven to be with Him, when we get to see His face. God has been with each of us since the beginning of time. The Holy Spirit is constantly calling us to the Lord. calling us to open our eyes and to see the light. As a dragon, we have felt his presence since then, speaking to us, guiding us to do his will. However, with each generation that lives and passes away, we have slowly turned our gaze away from him. His presence used to rule our hearts and guide our paths, but is now fading into nothing. But just because a few believe in him doesn't mean that he is not there. His power or strength does not decrease because we don't believe in him. He was, is, and will always be. For now he fills the earth with his presence, longing to be with us like he once was. The next generation needs to hear about God. They need to get to know him again. They need to know him and want him more than they have ever wanted anything before. But how could we make a spoiled generation see that there is a greater purpose for their life aside from the path of torment and struggle that they have created for themselves? My generation of dragons only knows how to kill, blow rages of fire, and destroy everything that people have built. How do we tell thousands of dragons that their purpose in life is not to be like their parents, and that their reason for living is protecting the very people that they have only ever lived to kill? Lord, how did we become to be this unholy creature who only seeks more death and destruction? He created us to protect his people when they reached heaven. We were stationed all around the perimeters of heaven to protect and watch over those who had finally made it home. The cliff-like perimeters were a large, jagged stone edge that kept out the darkness. We were born on earth so that we could get to know the people, so that we could learn who they were and have a healthy relationship with them, to guide them to God and to help them while they were here on earth. If a dragon followed the paths that God had laid out for them and mastered their spiritual gifts, then they were chosen by God to serve on the League of Protectors in heaven with God. The angels live there, and choirs of millions are always singing his praises. God always sits on his throne, and he has governed over it all since the beginning of time. Once you came through the gates, you were never hungry, thirsty, or sleepy. There was no longer sadness, pain, or anger. You no longer had to worry about anything. All you had to do was rest and praise his holy name. In my dreams, I could see all the dragon ancestors on their stations with their wings spread for a full view, reflecting God's light to pour down onto the earth. I can see the warmth they had for the people in their eyes, the kind of love that could only be built because of having a relationship with them, serving with them, protecting them. Their noble statuesque faces lifted ever so slightly upwards, facing towards God's throne. Heavenly proud creatures they were. Unfortunately, when the light was created, the darkness was made known as the face of the deep. The legend tells us that it was into the darkness deep inside the earth that God sent the fallen ones when they were banished from heaven for trying to throw God off his throne. The darkness was a place absent of any light. Its walls were formed from the lava in the center of the earth. Hard, rough crevices of rock and fire went on for miles as far as the eyes could see. Rivers of lava and crushed rock and ash streamed through these crevices, void of any life. One of our first dragon ancestors was named Drake. He was the first dragon ever to rise against God. Drake was a name, and in the old language, it meant dragon. Drake thought he was better than the people that he was created to protect. His vanity and pride clouded his mind. He rallied against God and got other dragons and angels to rise against God too. God banished Drake and the fallen ones to the darkness, never allowed to enter into heaven again. They were cast down out of heaven, and they fell from the skies like a bolt of lightning. They were locked in the darkness and the fire and stoned for 1,000 years. God stripped away their armor and took away their gifts. Their scales turned to a black, coal-like structure and texture. no longer shiny and perfect. Their flame diminished to an orange fire because they no longer had access to the living water. It would still cause damage, but not like it used to. It no longer burns as hot. Their wings would take flight, but only for a short time. Their eyes could no longer see clearly at great distances like they once could. They could no longer hear each other through their thoughts. They could only hear through their ears. They could no longer talk to God or the other dragon protectors. Their hearing was limited to those only close to their surroundings. And in their case, lava and stone were all that there was that they could hear moving. Their spirits were immortal, so they would never die. The only way they could die was to be killed by another immortal being. However, God had banished them to live in the darkness away from the immortal living and the breathing beings, causing even greater bitterness and anger in their hearts. The stories tell us that it took him years, but Drake was able to dig himself out of the caves of darkness to get to the sunlight on the earth's surface. He and the other 3 banished dragons could now roam the earth with people once again. However, once he realized that he was on earth and could not get back into heaven, he became furious. His anger and hatred showed in everything that he did. He vowed to become greater and more powerful than God ever was. So he set out to gather all the humans' gold so that he could cover his scales again, hoping to achieve the glory that he once held. But no matter how much gold he plundered, all he could ever achieve was a mountain filled with gold and riches for him to sleep in. He could never eat enough cattle to get as strong as he once was. He could never drink enough water to quench his thirst. So in his anger, he roamed the earth seeking to devour and destroy all life. All he could think about was how mad he was at God for taking everything away from him. The more he would think about it, the madder he would get. Eventually, he was consumed with so much jealousy and rage that it drove him to go on an unspeakable killing spree. Not killing just livestock and people anymore, but some say that he even killed the dragons that he was banished with as well. No one knows for sure because their bodies were never found. They were just gone from existence without a trace. The times were beginning to change. People were moving faster than they ever used to. Daily life and small details of their day were getting less important each day they lived. They want to spend less time working in the field and more time playing. They want to get paid for things they don't make. They want more than they need. And the methods that they get to get them from place to place grew by extraordinary measures with every passing year. When finally the age settled to no longer need to talk to God, and the need for him to help them had started to fade away from their lives. Drake just disappeared into the night and hasn't been seen in close to a decade. His last attack was on a country village outside of London, and he wasn't successful at acquiring the gold from the building where it was being protected. Some say that he died of old age. Others say that he died of a broken heart from being cast out of heaven, away from God. But in the dead of the night, you feel the darkness a little more when the moon is small. The trees sway and crackle like his wings just brushed through them. All the creatures hide and go silent, as if they know something that we don't. They can see things in the dark that we can't. Every breath is shallow, like a featherweight rock skipping across the top of the water. You're afraid to breathe deeper because the darkness that's closing in on you would hear where you are. It's on nights like tonight that you know it's best that you just stay inside. Stay where it is safe and where you can see everything. The shadows don't tend to play tricks on your mind when you're inside. All you can do is breathe as shallow as possible and pray for the sun to rise again.